Namaste, everybody. So today I want to talk about childhood trauma, trauma recovery, and why we cannot ignore the study of consciousness any longer. If you've been following my work for any length of time, you undoubtedly understand that I talk a lot about narcissism, being raised by narcissistic parents, being raised in alcoholic homes where children are forced to deal with the daily unpredictability of their life. I talk a lot about being raised by people who are emotionally neglectful. I talk a lot about abandonment trauma. I talk a lot about how abandonment as a child is akin to death. If you abandon a child, if you do not feed it, if you do not clothe it, if you do not hold it, it will die. It will not survive. And the reason I talk so passionately and have over the course of my career, especially up until now, about these early childhood adverse experiences is because in my own life, I figured out that my codependency, my obsession with people needing me, with my obsession with people finding value in keeping me around, and understanding that that was tied to not feeling good enough. That was tied to having an immature sense of self, or actually no sense of self. That was tied to really believing at a subliminal or subconscious level that I had no innate value for who I was. I had to prove to you that I was worthy. And all that was a cover-up for shame. I was running from shame, but I didn't know it. As a child, I grew up under the influence of two unrecovered adult children of alcoholics. My mother and father were both tremendously wounded in their childhood. And we know now that what parents don't heal, they pass along to their children. It's just a fact. It's going to be up to the next generation to take the time to stop, to break the cycle, to look within, and do the emotional recovery work necessary to heal and break free of the generational karma or trauma, which is essentially emotional cause and effect. If a mother does not love herself, it is impossible to instill her child, especially her daughter, with a sense of self, a positive sense of self. It just doesn't happen. If a mother is overly critical of herself, she will undoubtedly infuse her daughter with the same sense of self-criticism. This is where eating disorders come from. This is where being obsessed with aging comes from. The obsess of being liked on Instagram and selfies, and why so many children below the age of 18 are struggling to even find a reason to live some days. We have become a society that is plastic, that is superficial, and is infusing the consciousness of younger generations that it's all about being the prettiest, getting the most likes, being the coolest, even being the quirkiest, or even being the most wounded. It's all about that first narcissistic top prize where we get to claim that we are the best at something. And sometimes it's the best at being wounded. It's the best at being forgotten. And this is the society that we have created, especially with the inception of social media. Narcissism is on the rise, according to research, and it's no wonder. And so when we're talking about narcissism and we're talking about childhood trauma, I've always taken the vantage point of helping people understand that the way they behave, their codependency issues, their fear of not being good enough, their need to find other people's approval, the need to seek validation, the need to feel like they need permission to feel their feelings, the inability to self-advocate, the inability to say no, or feeling like you can't set a boundary with your overly bearing, overly critical mother or father, the fear that they will think you are the worst son or daughter in the world, the fear of coming out of the denial of a toxic family system. I've always wanted people to understand that all of those fears and all of the behaviors that you are experiencing that are toxic, that make you a magnet for more drama, that make you a magnet for a narcissist or a predator type personality, stem from adverse childhood experiences. They stem from trauma. And that was really important because that understanding allows you to develop like gentle accountability, which is what we refer to in the 12-week Breakthrough Coaching Program, where we're learning to be observing of our patterns and our programs from a higher state of consciousness, because we're recognizing that we are not our pattern, we are not our program. So it's so much easier to let go and forgive yourself when you realize it could be no other way. This is the junk that went in, this is the junk that comes out. This is the data. Whatever data goes in becomes my algorithm. That's the data that comes out, and I experience that in the 3D world. Part of my evolutionary journey, and if you're on this journey, you should be expanding, you shouldn't stay stuck. But so many people that I know in my own personal life are so stuck. My clients are those who reach out to me and they say, listen, I know something's wrong and I need your help. I need you to help me break through. I need you to help me break free of codependency, or I need to understand how to deal with a critical mom, or I need to understand how to set boundaries with a toxic family, or my son is marrying a narcissist and I don't know how to emotionally handle this. I don't know how to let go, or any number of things. My spouse is cheating on me, or I've experienced a smear campaign. These are people who I absolutely resonate with because they're people who are saying, I need help and I want to get better. And only the humble shall inherit the kingdom of heaven, which, by the way, is a state of mind, in my opinion. And so when we're experiencing this state of heaven, we're experiencing peace of mind, the peace that surpasses human understanding, something has happened in our consciousness. You can't go from being, for example, a single codependent mom with 3 children, divorcing someone who, in my opinion, had high narcissistic traits. You can't go from being that woman and having toxic relationship after toxic relationship after toxic relationship to experiencing a beautiful, harmonious, equanimous, adult, mature, romantic relationship with a partner who is empathic, who is generous and kind, and have it sustained for 14 years, which I've been able to do with my husband, Anthony. You can't do that without a shift in consciousness, because I was tuned up for nothing but heartache before my awakening, nothing before my awakening of consciousness, nothing before the accountability factor, where I had to actually work at developing the mental skills to change my programming, to become the absolute true developer of my mind. And I fought back. No, trauma, you're not going to win. No, survival thinking, you're not going to win. No, subconscious subliminal programming, you're not going to win. No, generational karma, you're not going to win. I'm going to win. The higher self, Lisa, is going to win. The creative being that I am, that has unlimited potential, once I awaken and I start fighting back and saying no more. Really hard stuff, really hard journey. And I would say so many people in my personal life are stuck and they're not doing this work. And I don't blame them for that, because the mind doesn't know it's doing anything wrong. The mind is the subject, it's subject to the 5 senses. What happens to us as human beings is that we have a psychological app, if you will, the id, ego, and superego. We also have 2 streams of consciousness, call it the consciousness app. We have the subconscious mind, the conscious mind. So we have a personality app, we have a consciousness app, and we have a childhood app, and all of this comes into our stream of senses. Our 5 senses take in everything that's happening outside of us, and our apps filter out this information. So if I experienced tremendous trauma in my life as a little girl, my personality app tells me it's all my fault. My consciousness app keeps me below the veil of consciousness, recycling these ideas in the subconscious mind, and then they filter through the conscious mind. Now, the reason we cannot ignore the groundbreaking, incredible work and strides that's happening in neuroscience and in the study of consciousness any longer, if we are going to get past our limits as human beings, we can't ignore it anymore. We just can't. And we're scratching at the surface. People like Joe Dispenza, they're scratching the surface. They're doing tremendous work. Eckhart Tolle, scratching the surface. When you combine trauma with consciousness, and trauma and ego with consciousness, and the very aspect of the nature of reality, you begin to see this incredible dovetailed, holistic approach to understanding that your reality and mine, it basically could be no other way, based on the way that we grew up, based on our consciousness app, based on whether or not we change at all, we make any changes in our life. I also want to drive home the point that we have to understand as trauma survivors that our brains are skewed for the negative, that the brain and the mind, the average brain, the average mind of a human being work in tandem. And there's a filtering system. And the filter is set towards survival. It's not set towards peacocks and lollipops and walking in the sun and taking long walks on the beach and love and comfort and security and abundance and health and peace of mind. It's not. The average human mind is skewed for the negative. The average brain, the average nervous system comes pre-built to help you survive. Now, why should you know that? You should know that because you do not have to walk around on planet Earth feeling depressed and anxious and unworthy the rest of your life. If you know this, you can heal your life. Your brain, left to its average defenses, will always default to survival thinking. Your subliminal mind, your subconscious mind will filter out information at hyperspeed that, in other words, it'll only allow information into your conscious field. Remember, it's the subconscious and the conscious mind that make up the mind. Awareness is a completely separate animal. Awareness is the ability to recognize, ooh, what's happening in my mind. That's the key. That's what I teach in the 12-week class, my 8-week masterclass, and Soul School, a course in the Quantum Science of Love Consciousness. It's all about expanding your awareness, expanding your consciousness so that you can observe what's happening in the conscious mind. And you recognize from a detached space that what's happening in the conscious mind must have been filtered through the subconscious mind. Yes, that's where it came from. If it came from the subconscious mind, it's a pattern, it's a program, and it comes from the past. That's why so many people are living in the past. They're reactive. They're not trusting, they're not accepting themselves, they're not loving themselves, they're not seeking abundance because they're stuck in the past. That's not their fault, because the average mind will only filter in information that's tied to survival. Why is this so significant for people who follow my work? Because most of the people who follow my work are childhood trauma survivors. And these are the people that more than anyone need to start researching consciousness, need to start researching the nature of reality. You need to do this, dear one, because if you do not, you will remain below the veil of consciousness. You can follow my work, you can take my courses, they will certainly help. But I'm telling you that if you are a trauma survivor, if you have experienced narcissistic abuse, if you have been raised by a narcissistic mother or a narcissistic father, you need to understand how your brain is going to only filter through information that's tied to survival. Codependency is survival. I'm not going to bark back at my nasty mom. Why? Because below the veil of consciousness, I fear abandonment, and abandonment is akin to death. I'm not going to ask my husband to help with the laundry because he might see me as a burden and that might give him a reason to leave me. And I fear abandonment because my father left the house when I was 2. And so that abandonment frightened me as a child. I watched my mother grow up in a fear-based mentality. She was anxious. She always talked about my dad leaving, how hard it was to raise me on her own. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my husband leaving me is the worst thing that could happen. You're in survival, dear one. You could take care of yourself. You can learn a trade. You can get certifications. You can start following your bliss. You can start creating your own life that's based on information and data that really appeals to the inner you, the real you, outside of your 5 senses. something that is so intrinsic to you, that is tied to your higher self, you could walk in that direction, but unless you awaken, you won't. You will live in this pattern. You will fear disapproval. You will seek your mother's approval, your father's approval. You will continue to be the scapegoat in your family. You will not know how to set boundaries. You will feel like you have been put on God's green earth to, you're Stretch Armstrong. Let's say you're born in an alcoholic home. The codependent in the home is usually the child that took on all the responsibilities as a child for the siblings, even for cleaning their clothes and making them dinner and making sure that they had someone to sleep with at nighttime if they were afraid because mom and dad were drunk. The codependent in the family is usually that over-responsible, empathic sibling. The child that saw everything, absorbed everything, and was trying to keep the peace and knew that the house could explode at a pin drop. A pin's going to drop and the house is going to explode. So this is someone who's grown up hypervigilant. So what happens as an adult, your brain is now filtering information that's only tied to survival, how to keep you safe. So what happens when you're at work? What happens if you're the boss of a company? If you're the boss of a company, your data stream is tied to survival because that's what your brain and your nervous system were wired to do. These are predetermined apps. It's just part of being a human being. So if you have employees that are starting to argue, you might step in as the mediator, but you might end up enabling a situation. You might end up being afraid to fire people who deserve to be fired because you don't want to hurt their feelings, or you don't want them to think poorly of you because you grew up as the scapegoat child and you were labeled as crazy or not good enough. So it's very difficult to step into a position of authority when you have codependency. So even as a boss, no matter what situation you're in, as an adult, this survival thinking is what is going to be streamed into the mental field. And that's why trauma survivors must understand that the true path to healing is an elevation of consciousness. You cannot heal your life without changing your mindset. And my path has been to recognize that it wasn't me, it was just my programming. That's my 12-week class. And then eventually I realized, like, that's not enough. I have to teach people how to flow their consciousness. That was 8-week masterclass. And now I teach people how to grow their soul school, a course in the quantum science of love consciousness, where we get into the nitty-gritty of what is perception, what is the nature of reality, and how can we reverse engineer so even though we have these perceptions that are the result of download and programming from the external world and also the default settings of the human brain through the 5 senses, despite this, how do I become my true self? And that's what we delve in Soul School. And so I really hope that as I evolve as a content creator and a life coach and an award-winning author, as I continue to grow and continue to age and continue to learn things in my life, that those of you who follow my work are getting really, really clear that Lisa A. Romano is not about getting stuck. It's about understanding that enlightenment is a journey. It's not an event. That transformation is an ongoing process, that you're not supposed to get stuck. Now that you know that your mother's a narcissist, don't get stuck there. Okay, you've gone no contact. That's not enough. How can we get you to focus more on what your innate values are, what your innate gifts are, what are your innate desires? How do we bring joy and abundance into your life? How do we get you from living in a state of ego or survival thinking or survival consciousness into a state of love consciousness? So never give up and keep growing. And that's the key. As long as you don't give up, you're going to get there. It's taken me 30 years to get where I am, and it's worth it. I remember when I was first separated saying to myself, well, I'm probably going to live another 15 years. So what would happen if I meditated every single day for 15 years? Would my life change? You bet your butt my life has changed. What would happen if I just, for argument's sake, every day for the next 15 years, saved a little bit of money every day. What would happen if I spent less than I made for the next 15 years? Would that make a difference? You bet your butt that makes a difference. What would happen if for the next 15 years, I woke up every day and I started my day off with a goal list towards what I wanted to achieve in my life? Would that make a difference? Yes. What if every day for the next 15 years, I knew that it was up to me to change my energy, change my vibration, and the only way that it could happen is if I changed my thoughts? Would that make a difference? Yes, dear one, it's made all the difference. I could have never imagined that I would be who I am with the content that I've created and the courses that I've created, and going on live cruises with the members of my community and inspiring a whole group of people on my app and in my Breakthrough Warrior membership site and my private communities. I would have never thought that I would have been one of the top meditation teachers on Insight Timer. I would have never guessed it. What I did was I followed my bliss. Thank you, Joseph Campbell, one of the best writers, one of the best philosophers and teachers of all time. Follow your bliss, dear one. If you follow your bliss, you will follow the light out of the fog that is subconscious survival consciousness, which is not your fault. So I hope that you're here becoming an extraordinary human being through the process of elevating your consciousness despite a painful past. Namaste until next time, as I bow to the love and light that is absolutely in you. Until next time, bye for now. Hey, if you love this content, don't forget to check out the next video, and you can go to my website and take the codependency quiz.